Yeah.
Man, you supposed to be recording. You gotta cancel that. That's uncool.
Bluez, nigga. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Four Colored Man podcast with your host, Terry Bluez, where, men of color can come and be inspired and feel free to be vulnerable. You know what I mean? And one of my inspirations for me even doing this podcast is the special guest that we got today. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. And make sure you emphasize that. Put some respect on my man's name, Dr. Kenton Rambsy. Welcome, my good man.
Hello, sir. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you coming on, man. Like I said before, a lot of the group text conversations that we have, it was a lot of the inspiration for me even doing this podcast, man. So I am appreciative that I was able to get you on as one of the first few guests.
Man, of course, man. The group chat, man, is lit.
It's fire, and it might get some people fired.
Oh, don't say that.
Yeah, man, I know you got a job to keep, so do I, so we ain't gonna get into it. But for the people, man, introduce yourself, let them know who you are, run down your credentials for the people.
Okay, cool. My name is Dr. Kenton Ramsey. I'm originally from Jackson, Tennessee. Born and raised. I went to undergraduate at Morehouse College. I did my master's and PhD at the University of Kansas, and now I'm an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Arlington. So that is where I am, and that is what I have been doing these last, my whole life.
And I want to make sure that it's known that was a very modest introduction, because not only is he a tenure track professor at UTA, but also you're on a fellowship right now, right?
Yes, I am on a fellowship right now. Getting my life together,
Yeah, you out in DC or Baltimore?
Yeah, I'm in DC right now. I am in DC in the DMV area. I am on a Woodrow Wilson fellowship. So right now, I am fortunate enough to be able to spend my waking hours working only on my book. So it's a really good feeling to wake up and just, write. Feels great.
Oh yeah, what's the name of the book you're working on?
Tentatively, the name of the book is titled The Geographies of African American Short Fiction. And I'm basically in this book looking at all of the things that we read and anthologies and come to think of. How do we come to read of all these things over the years? And this book actually guides us through a history of what we read in high school and college literature courses and why.
Now that's interesting. So okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because that gives a perfect segue into your specialties, right? So you specialize in digital humanities, right?
Yeah, digital humanities. I work with data.
Yeah. So now I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm just now kind of figuring out what that is, because I work in a position where I'm starting a digital humanities project at school, so I got to learn more about that. But I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't know what the fuck that was before, man. but for the audience, for the people who don't know, in layman's terms, how would you describe that?
Man, you know what? It's so funny, because the idea of digital humanities, I think, is always ever evolving. For instance, when I started graduate school in 2010, the concept of it was just emerging and it didn't exist. 8 years later, I still don't know exactly what the concept is, but I can definitely tell you what I do within this subfield. I work with data to try to find out things about Black people, particularly Black art. I ask the question, what can data tell us about Black art? What can data tell us about Black music? So with that being said, data is hardly ever neutral. You can say numbers, say what you want to, how you want them to tell different types of history. In particular, I try to come in and collect all of this information about Black people to see what can we gauge by looking at this, or what type of insight can we gauge by looking at Black people in great numbers. Particularly, I focus on this idea called distant reading. it's basically like there are too many books in the world to read, right? There's so many books. I don't think I could ever read them all at once. But the idea is, what about when we use machines to help us read? What do we learn about ourselves by taking 4 steps back? So that's kind of where I deal with in a way. And I know that was convoluted.
Yo, that kind of blew my mind a little bit because I always talk about the robot apocalypse, but we teaching these motherfuckers to read too. We ain't nobody gonna be safe from this shit.
You know what?
These bots is reading.
It's so interesting though. But think about how much of the computers we think to dictate our lives now. Like, I'll be for real with you. One of the biggest ways that I get information is usually through Instagram, through social media. I depend on my friends to share information so I can find out what's going on in the world, whether it's about music, politics, sports, what have you. If it's breaking news, I hope it's found in Instagram. But think about what you have when you have this web of all the same people sharing the same things. Computers began to pick up sentiments about what are people more into, how do people respond to certain types of information. Like, in a way, we're in the Matrix, but I don't want to make it seem like it's that high tech, that spooky. But
no, it is though. No, you know how you know it is? Because you know what's funny? We got an Alexa in the kitchen, and I unplug that motherfucker every chance I get. Because I know this shit is listening to me. Because there's no way that me and you can have a conversation, and the next thing I know, Facebook is advertising some shit for me. Like, if I start cracking on you about your hairline, and then next thing you know, niggas is promoting Jamie Foxx wigs on my page, like, nigga, I know that there's a constant intake, especially, you got that shit in your pocket. So it's constantly intaking information and processing it. And in a way, it's trying to best serve you, but that's a slippery slope. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's only assuming that the people collecting and harvesting this information have your best interest at heart. Again, I'm an English professor that teaches about data, but I see a need for teaching about data ethics. How do you use people's data ethically? That's kind of where I'm thinking about. This field is emerging so quickly, but I just fear that the field is not the actual institutional side, like what we teach in class. Are we teaching enough? Because think about how you use your phone. Think about the advertisements you get on your phone. I just did this Apple update, and it's so scary because it tells you in your battery time how much you're using your phone, what apps you're using the most. But I think that gives us a lot of insight into who we really are. How do we operate on a day-to-day basis? But particularly, I'm into, what do Black people do online differently from white people, differently from Asian people, differently from Hispanic people? I'm really into, how do we provide more deeper definitions of what it means to be Black, particularly what does it mean to be Black with a digital footprint, so to speak?
Yeah, that's still an interesting concept because, like you said, it's like the intention. You're using it in an environment of academia. You know what I mean? But basically, it's like, yo, let me figure out what Black people are doing and what they're into, and then let me use that to sell something to them. Like, isn't that what marketing is? Like, isn't that what advertising is in this age of like digital marketing?
And it's funny that you say that because, again, I'm in an English department, but I found over the past 3 years, I've had a majority of my students going to get jobs in advertising. I find that's so interesting because, but at the same time, it makes sense. It's composing messages to people, composing messages that people will respond to. And online, we don't just respond to words. We respond to the image. We respond to how the advertisement makes us feel. Does it make us laugh? Does it make us cry? What does it do? And I think those are the types of things we have to make these negotiations. So I'm training my students. How do you think about rhetoric visually and written rhetoric? It's just so interesting. So I really like what I do in that regard.
Yo, it's funny you say that, right? Because I said this the other day, and I'm like, if you think about like communication and like the earliest forms of communication, earliest forms of written communication are presumed to be what, like caveman drawings, right? And then, hieroglyphics.
Like cave woman, we're progressive too, right?
yeah, exactly. We communicate memes and emojis now. And that's like, you know what I mean? Like the or the actual written language or the way we use it, because most people are communicating via their phone, whether it be text or email. And sometimes you'll find yourself sending an email writing like you would text somebody, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, most definitely. I think that's so interesting. So I've always had this debate in some types of ways. People say, I think people read less now. You know, it's a shame to what kids are going to and young people, yada, yada, yada. But I find it interesting. I say, like, really? I counter that response and say, I think people are reading more. The thing is, what are people reading? Are you reading Instagram? Are you reading blogs? Are you reading newspapers? Are you reading iBooks? What are you ebooks, excuse me. What are you reading? So I think that's just very interesting. Like literacy is taking on has so many more meanings in a sense. Literacy is not just can you read Great Expectations or can you read Invisible Man. Reading also means how do you interpret pictures? Do you get social jokes, so to speak? I teach a class on Jay-Z, and I always tell my students, in this class, your pop culture knowledge, what you know about Jay-Z and Beyonce is actually valuable because it helps us think a little bit more about these memes circulating on him. What do they mean? Like when you see Jay-Z in Elevator and Solange, you got to have a cultural memory, so to speak, to know what a meme like that might be referring to. So, no, I think it's just valuable how we use all of these mental faculties on the internet, like visually, auditory learning, as well as like written old school text.
Yeah, like for me, like I commute to work a lot, so like I listen to a lot of podcasts or I listen to like a lot of audio books. But I mean, it's the same thing. I'm taking that information, whether I read it or whether it was read to me. But bringing it back a little bit, you mentioned the Jay-Z class, and I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to say, within meeting you, and let me say this, right? Like, I consider you as one of my mentors, like, because for me, grad school, like, I think I had a very unique experience because even though, and I want to get into this a little bit later, but even though, like, we were at a predominantly white institute, I was able to, like, have this pocket of blackness with you and with Yaki, and, like, I'm going to get him on here, too.
Get
and even
here.
Cedric. and you know, it's funny because, like, when you looked at my thesis committee, like, yo, I was so proud that I got all niggas and a Jew.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yo, but I had the opportunity to work under you. And how I found out about you was like, yo, there's a professor that teaches a Jay-Z class. And I was like, oh, word? A Jay-Z class, I gotta see this. So that's how I found out about you and ended up, you know, I think either Yaki linked us up or Spencer maybe. I don't remember.
Well, it was all fate. It was on the stars. We all met how we were supposed to, you know, right?
Yeah, it was. I was so happy that we got a chance to do that. But within creating this Jay-Z class and how you talk about like data mining for what Black people are into. And one thing I say is like, yo, people talk about like beefing with each other. And to me, it's like not the artist, it's like whoever has the biggest fan base. The reason you can't say shit about Beyonce is because the Bayhive is these motherfuckers is on your ass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So within that, like, how did you come about even creating that class, one? And two, how did you sell that shit to white people to be like, yo, we should make this let's have white kids pay money to take this class?
You know what? It's funny because I didn't even think about selling it to people, like in terms of selling it to white people when I came up with it. I came up with this idea, how can I have a class that's kind of like an intro to data mining, but how can I convince college kids to take that? Because in a sense, data mining as a class is still kind of relatively new when you think about it on the college level. But, you know, to myself, I was thinking, what if I had a class on and called it a Jay-Z class and really had that serve as kind of like the front for a data mining class? That's the part that I really thought about it. And it was able to kind of grab students' attention because if I was telling them, hey, we're going to be working with text mining software, topic modeling this, visualization software, yada, 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 I think people would be intimidated by it. But it's so interesting because everybody thinks they're an expert on music. Everybody, no matter what walk of life you come from, you feel like you know something about music that the other person does not. And, you know, I think Jay-Z, hate him or love him, he is still one of the most, notice what I'm about to say this word, consequential rappers. of the late 1990s up until even present day. So the idea is, he's a focal point that I think is very interesting, a polarizing focal point for some people that makes class discussions very interesting.
What do you mean by consequential? When you say he's the most consequential artist, you mean like the most impact?
I'm not. Well, I think it's all of those types of things put together. I think first off, let's be for real. It's not like he makes trash music. Even if you hate him or love him, you probably know at least one Jay-Z song. He's like, you know what? I can bounce my head to that. I think also when you think about what he's done for rap music in general, he's been involved in some of the most iconic beefs in general. I think that's a cool thing. Like, to be somebody, you gotta be in a beef in history, right? Whether you W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, Zora Neale Hurston, or Richard Wright, to be somebody, you got to beef with someone who's also considered to be at the top of their game. More than that, I mean, think about this. I think this is always so funny, which I teach to my students. In the 90s, rappers did not know they were going to be rich. They were still pursuing it for the art form. People thought rap was a fad.
Yeah. Nobody took that shit serious.
I know, like, if you look at some of the pioneers of rap, it's telling that they are not that rich because, they didn't have an insight into the thing to be like, hey, this is about to come into this billion-dollar industry. Let me try to have some more ownership and more this and more that. That's why I think it's so important that we honor all of those people, not necessarily because of their income, but I think as a consequential rapper, Jay-Z he's collaborated with so many people that by teaching a class on Jay-Z, I get to teach about, so many different people from Timbaland to the Neptunes, even taking it down to, Houston dealing with UGK and all those types of things. That's why I think he's just dealt with so many people. And, I'm from a Napster generation, similar to you. And I can remember a time where people were closed off from music regionally. If you were in the South, you only listened to Southern music.
It's funny. Well, it is funny because you from the South.
Yeah,
you from Tennessee, right?
Tennessee, yeah, Jack.
Yeah. So for me, like growing up, to be honest with you, like I didn't. Like I was never, I don't care who feel any kind of way with about this, but I was like never a Jay-Z fan growing up. Like I grew up in Texas, so my scope of music was UGK, Cash Money, 8Ball and MJG crept in there. Like, you know what I mean? Occasionally, we got Tupac and Biggie because that was like what was mainstream, or before Jay-Z, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I didn't get into Jay-Z till like I was in the military and was with people from all over the world. So like my East Coast homies and all that. But yeah, you're right. It was a very regional thing. And now, like even with dialects and with slang, like everything's universal. Everything's on the internet. So like, I don't know you can't really tell where artists is from these days half the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And see, I think that's the thing, right? Because let's think of the cliche thing of this, right? You're a black man, right? You listen to rap music. So you must know who Jay-Z is and you must be a fan, right? But I think in class, it's so dope when I can hear people coming in and say, you know what? I never really listened to Jay-Z's music, or I never really did this and that. And I think this is so interesting. Some people read Shakespeare for fun and then they say they love it, right? Some people are introduced to Shakespeare in a classroom, but the idea is so many references that Shakespeare has put forward exist in modern day society. So the idea is, Romeo, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo? Wherefore art thou, Romeo? You might not have read Romeo and Juliet, but you know that phrase. I think when you see people talking about get that dirt off your shoulder and brushing off your shoulder from Hillary Clinton to Obama, I think it's safe to say Jay-Z's impact is just goes beyond rap music, but it's in pop culture.
Yeah, no, in pop culture, but we are pop culture.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You can't it is funny because like you remember back when Cash Money dropped Bling Bling.
Yes.
And then you seen the process, and when old white women started using it in commercials, then you like, okay. But it's a constant, I don't want to say appropriation, but like a constant like, yo, this is the origins of that, and it's very clear. You know what I mean?
Very much so, very much. But I think that's always been the case, right? It's always
no, absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
And I think
we move the culture. Whatever we think is cool. Period.
Yeah,
You know what let me know that?
What's that?
This is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Yo, when I was in Korea in 2007, 2008, yo, you do not know how much Black culture ascends until you see a room of 50 to 60 Asian people bust out into the Soulja Boy Tell 'em dance in unison on a Korean club dance floor. I seen that shit with my own eyes. I'm like, nigga, this was 2007. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I would want to push it a step further and ask, now, even though people are into the music, even though people are fans dancing to it and it's getting everybody, it's kind of a common ground in the sense that everybody know what this song is. How much do people know about the communities that actually produce that? That's the part that I'm just so interested in shedding light on too, because one of the things I feel like in a Jay-Z class, to understand something about Jay-Z, you got to understand your Black music history in general, because Jay-Z uses so many samples in his music that it's like taking a time tunnel back through Black music. Like, I know one of my favorite songs, Never Change, it samples David Ruffin. And if you don't know who David Ruffin is, I think you missed the whole point to a lot of Jay-Z music and why he sampled him in the first place. So it helps me talk about so many different types of people. And I feel like I have a Black history, Black artistic expression class by way of Jay-Z. And we also do a little bit of data mining too. So yes, it's a cool concept, the way to, package stuff and teach it to students, because students, that's the thing. It's funny. I think about how I package stuff to people. Will my class fill up? Those types of things matter now. How do I get people in the actual seats to prove that I am legitimate and worthy enough as a professor? That's something that really stays on my mind.
Ooh, I'm glad you used that terminology, and I don't want to get onto that yet because I got that in the notes to talk about later. But it's funny, right? Because I think we had this conversation before. Because when I see like you in class, like when you would like Snapchat or Instagram video your class, I'd be like, yo, why it's all white people? Like, it ain't no, like, you would think in a class at a university, it's like, oh, this is a Jay-Z class. Niggas would be on that shit quick. But no, like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I thought that was weird. I think we had talked about, like, you said there was some reason a disconnect between the Black students and you think it's literature or the humanities part, or what do you think that is?
I think we got to step back and look across the board. How many Black male English majors do you know? You know what I'm saying. Other than me,
yeah.
Korean English, you don't really hear about that thing because in our community, oftentimes, and I will just say this just because getting on my soapbox here, people oftentimes wonder, what can you do with a degree in English? Well, on the one hand, I think if you have a degree in English, you're a keen researcher and someone who is very, 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 very good at analyzing things. In this regard, though, I think one of the things I do like about my class is that it brings people into an English class who otherwise might not be in that class. I've had people from engineering. I have people from nursing. I've had people from like math and things like that just have taken the class, learning a little bit more about literary characteristics just off of the strength of just Jay-Z's name. So I think that's cool.
Yeah. So changing gears a little bit, right? You just said like, how many, Black male English majors is there, right?
Yeah.
And so with that being said, right, like you, first of all, like, how many siblings do you have?
I have 2 siblings.
Brother and a sister, right?
Brother and a sister, yeah.
And all of you are at least master level educated, right?
Master's level educated in English at that, at least. Yeah, interesting, right?
Yeah, and your sister is a lawyer, right?
Yeah, she was a lawyer. My brother's an English PhD as well. My sister, after she got her master's in English, she got smart and went to law school.
And are both your parents What's the highest level of education of your parents?
My mother's has a master's. My father has a bachelor's. They're retired school teachers. My father's retired band director, and my mother's retired high school English teacher.
Oh, interesting. So both educators. So, okay, cool. Now, I have this conversation with my white coworkers because, like, for me, my aunt was like, she graduated from college. Like, my parents didn't, and she was the only one of like her generation in our family to do it. I think my grandpa has a college degree, but I mean, he died when my dad was like 12. But for us, like for me and my cousins, like I think 6 or 4 out of 6 of us have college degrees. At least 3 of us have masters, right? So for us, it was always her pushing, you guys are going to go to school, you guys are going to go to school, you guys are going to go to school. And what I found with like my white cohorts or white coworkers or whatever, I'll ask this question or bring this up in conversation. And like, they'll come from a lot, like everybody in their family went to college. So for them, it's not like, oh, you're going. It's just like implied, like, oh yeah, that's what everybody does, right? So like for you guys, was it, oh, you're going to go to college? And when you said, oh, we're going to major in English, they were like, oh yeah, they're cool because they're educators?
Yeah, I think definitely college was on the idea, but it was never like necessarily a thought. I would think, reflecting back on it growing up, it was just kind of understood that's what you would do. Actually, to be for real with you, in my head growing up, which is kind of weird for some people, I thought grad school, I at least was going to get a master's. Or at least that's how I conceived growing up as a child. Like, I would at least go to grad school. I should add that there's like a 13-year difference between my brother and sister and I. So I saw them in grad school. Like, my sister started college, I started kindergarten. So I always saw them doing, so I just assumed that's what you do. Because, you know, that's back when I used to really like to be like, oh, you're supposed to be like your older sibling and grow up and do this and do that. Yeah, so, yeah, that was funny.
So, you know, coming up, your parents are both educators. You're the youngest of 3 siblings, and both of them, you know, are off in school. Did you go into English because of that, or like, did you find a passion in that? What made you go into English?
I really do think it's a little bit like what's the family business in a way, if you get what I mean. Like sometimes I think that definitely had a major part in it, that I was looking at people ahead of me. I kind of already knew about things. So for instance, when I got to college and I was reading stuff in my major, that was like my 3rd or 4th time coming to things. So I definitely think prior background experience played a role. You know what I'm saying? Like, for instance, I think it's no question that George Bush and his brother Jeb Bush are into politics. You know, it's kind of like the family thing. So that's kind of how I like to think about English. Oh, that's an interesting example that I just used. Oh.
Yeah, man, because it's like that. Because I think, you know what I mean? Like, in that sense of who we look up to, you were able to, you know, grow up in this, like, you know, Huxtable style, you know, style upbringing, where both of your parents are professionals, you know, encourage you to go to school. You know, hopefully your daddy wasn't raping people, but like, no, I'm just bullshitting. Just bullshitting. But no, but it's funny, right? So within that sense of, like, I joke, but you have a very, like, on the outside looking in, a very like Huxtable-esque kind of upbringing, which you ended up going to Morehouse, right?
Yes.
HBCU. So, like, what made you go into that route of going HBCU versus going anywhere else?
Oh, it's kind of, my parents told me kind of in a sense I had to go to an HBCU, at least for undergrad. That was
word
too, yeah. Like, no, it was kind of understood. Like for instance, my parents went to HBCUs. They met at Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee. My brother went to Tougaloo College in Tougaloo, Mississippi, and my sister went to Spelman College. So I guess the thing was, it was understood which black school are you going to, at least for undergrad. And my sister was, my sister was really into me going to Morehouse.
That's interesting. So it's like not only family business, like, yeah. Well, was it ever a sense of like, to reinforce your blackness. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because here's my thing, right? Like, I think for me, like, I was, in predominantly white school systems. And I think one of my favorite, like, I'm not a big Cosby Show fan, but one of my favorite shows that I did like was A Different World.
I was going to say, I consider A Different World too. I was more of a Different World fan. So
yeah, most definitely. I thought, first of all, I consider myself a Hillman alumni. I think you've seen me wear my shirt a couple times.
Yeah.
I definitely consider myself a Hillman alumni. And number two, like Dwayne, I consider myself like Dwayne Wade. Like, niggas slept on Dwayne Wade. He was low-key fresh, and he ended up pulling the baddest bitch on the show. Like, bitches slept on that nigga like the first 2-3 seasons. And then they say he was the smart nigga. Nigga J-Game was fresh. Come on now. Low-key Dwayne Wade was the shit, nigga. Like,
I feel it.
Yo, but within that, like, for me, I wanted to go to Prairie View. Ooh, but my people was like, nah.
Yeah.
Because my dad went and went buck wild. That nigga was running like check scams and
wow.
all kind of wild shit. So,
so
they was like, yeah, we're not gonna have a repeat of that. But it was more like discouraged. So like for you, was that just like a necessary experience for you to stay connected? Like, you know what I mean?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, at least, and I'm thinking about this now, and I didn't get it into hindsight, like I'm really starting to understand the value of this now. My parents wanted me to know it was not, to be black is not only one thing. They wanted to let me know I was a black person in West Tennessee growing up. And they wanted me to get the idea to be around a lot of different people. So, yeah, of course, I was in honors classes and stuff. And growing up, I was typically in my classes, at least, not necessarily at the school, but I was interacting, at least intellectually, in, class discussions, class debates, class projects with primarily white people. So one of the biggest things I think that I actually learned more about myself was being around a lot of different black people. So one thing that I always really like about Morehouse is that, like, even though some would say that Morehouse men are very sure of themselves, but I find that so refreshing to be in a classroom when it's not on you to have the final say about something black, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. Because I think we have this discussion a lot of like, well, before I say that, getting into that, right? So you go from Morehouse, HBCU, Malcolm X flag on the wall, fist in the air.
Probably a Martin Luther King, but it's okay.
You a Martin guy? You a Martin guy versus a Malcolm guy?
You know what? To be for real with you, after going to Morehouse, I think I became a little bit more Martin. Don't get me wrong, I love the rhetoric of Malcolm X, but one of the things I feel more passionate about with King is he was actually doing some organizing. And for me, it's hard for me to get all of my friends who are majority black on the same page about going to a movie or a vacation. So, you know what I mean? Organizing all of those types of things, taking a march on Washington, I really thought about how radical that was in terms of actually, when you're in a leadership position, you got to compromise so much. So I thought about, Martin made some compromises. And I think if we look at Malcolm X, we see that he started to admire Martin's organizing skills. So I think that's one of the reasons I kind of think I like them both. Why can't I have both? No.
It's funny. Like, I respect that. I respect that opinion. It's just like, I think that's one of those black community debates. Like, big or pot.
Nice, right?
Yeah, or like, you know what I mean? Martin, Malcolm, like, wait, which side of the fence you on, my nigga? Like,
yeah. But I think it's so interesting. Actually, I taught this class called Greatest Beefs, and I tried to put rap debates in with like just historical debates. And I think that's the interesting thing about it. We have so much intellectual growth during the civil rights movement is because we get to contrast and compare different types of blackness. It's not one.
Well, I love the comparison you made earlier when you were talking about rap beefs and you were comparing rappers with literary authors, with poets. And like Kendrick Lamar just won a Pulitzer.
A Pulitzer, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I think that goes to show right there. Like, I think that's not saying that we need the verification, but that's the verification right there. Like, yo, rap is an art form. Like all this mumble rap stuff now, like, it's cool to bob your head to, but like the real poetry in the art, you know what I mean?
And it's funny that you're saying this about Langston Hughes, because I think about what were a lot of the criticisms about him during his heyday. It was that people said he was writing poetry that just anybody could read off the street. That's not art, because anybody can read that. You don't have to have a fancy, I mean, I'm watering this down a tad bit, but you don't have to have a fancy, learn it. You don't have to be learned, have this big degree to interpret him. And that was the critique. They were saying he was making poetry just for the everyday person, right? And I think that's the funniest thing. Like, that's actually what we should applaud him for making poetry for everybody. That was
you gotta put the candy in the medicine.
Exactly.
So you go from Morehouse, Martin pictures on the wall. You probably had an afro or braids at least. You had, you know what I mean?
I was leaving that suited and booted. I don't know. I was leaving that suited and booted. I don't know. That's interesting that you said that.
So you go from that to a fucking tornado that lands you in the middle of the yellow brick fucking road in Kansas.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, Dorothy. So how do you make that shift from HBCU to like Kansas, like middle America? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you know what? It was definitely a transition, but it wasn't the worst transition ever. And I'm going to tell you why. You know how you similarly said when you were in grad school, you had a very unique experience of having all Black mentors on your committee. Well, on your committee, also you had a Black or people of color that you were able to associate with. Similar for me, I think the one thing about being in a college town or being at a university is that it tries to attract, or at least schools should try to attract, diverse intellectual minds. And I think that was the thing. My committee members were majority Black. I had a lot of Black friends in grad school in a sense. And I think we came together a little bit more out of a sense of necessity there. We just only Black people in a foreign land. But I will say the funniest thing about being in Kansas, which I think is just hilarious in some types of ways, I'm about 6 feet, 6'1". That's cool. I think, kind of average height. But being in Kansas, I was always mistaken for somebody's basketball player.
Yo, you want to know what's funny about that? So, real quick, funny story. I, too, was also in Kansas. I was stationed at Fort Riley. And I don't know if you ever, while you were in Lawrence, ever went to Kansas City or even south. Yeah, I don't know why you were in K-State, but so it's where Fort Riley is. It's Fort Riley, and the city is on one side of the base. It's Junction City, and the other side is Manhattan. And it's so we share Manhattan with Kansas State.
Yeah.
So I was in the Army at the time, and I was about early 20s or whatever. I still had hair. So check this out, right? I'm in the Walmart in Manhattan, and I'm walking through the aisle, and I'm in the aisle. I don't know what I was getting, but this old white couple, they kept looking at me, like they would glance over, I would look, and then they would go back to what they were doing. They would glance over, I would look, and they go back to what they're doing. And I'm like, yo, that's kind of weird. And then the old guy was just kind of staring at me for a minute. And I'm like, yo, you think he know me? I don't know if this is like a colonel or something. Them niggas try to check you when you're in public. I don't like that shit. But so I get what I'm getting, and I walk towards him because I got to walk past him. And so as I'm walking past him, the old guy stops me. He's like, hey. He's like, hey, what's going on? I was like, oh, I'm good, sir. He was like, so how you think you guys gonna do this season? And I'm like, excuse me? He was like, wait, you're a freshman, right? Like you play for Kansas State? And I was like, this is mad racist. But we're gonna do pretty good. Like, yeah, I just got here, so I'm red shirting this year, so I'm not gonna play. Like, I just kind of humored him.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, all right, man. I'll have your white guy fantasy of seeing a tall basketball player at Walmart. Now you got a story to tell your friends. Hey, I met one of those players today at Walmart. He's a really nice guy.
But I think this is funny because you asked me how did I transition to a Kansas environment, And I think in a regard, like I do like to discuss this at times, just to talk about the intersections, my black male privilege, and I look somewhat athletic, I'm about 6'6'1". The transition was kind of easy for me. It seemed like I was supposed to be there. You know what I mean? Like it seemed like I fit something because let's be for real, at Kansas, there are a lot of black men there for the simple fact of look at what sports is for there. I mean, it's not the best football team, but it's still a football team that is D1. Basketball as well. Look how many black people are attracted by sports. And as a result, how many black people do you think were employed by athletics as well? So my transition was kind of, seemed like I was supposed to be there to some, if you get my...
Yo, that's funny because like the same thing with me, man. Like I'm 6'4", so people automatically think I play basketball. Like, I mean, and I like to hoop. Like I'm pretty athletic. Like my knees are bad now. I'm kind of old, but I always just ran with it. But it's funny that like, so where I went to undergrad was in San Antonio. So really it was predominantly Hispanic. Like, but like I was one of the very few black people who wasn't on an athletics team. If you seen somebody black there, about 85 to 90% chance they played some sport. Now, like, yeah, a lot of that's our way of getting out, but like, what does that say to, is that an admissions thing or are we not like applying to do anything else? You know what I mean?
I think that we're not 200 years out of slavery and we still got a lot of work to do. I think that's what that means.
Yo, no, it's funny, right? So, like, I was filming for this event at school the other night, and it was a lecture on the guy's name was Dr. Washington, and I forget what institute he worked for. I think he was out on the East Coast. You may have heard of him once I described what he was talking about. But he was basically like where I work at. I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota. Like it's pretty white here. And it's you know what? I ain't gonna say that because I want to keep my job. But
that's a very astute decision that you just.
But it's a very white area, but it's also very like liberal. You know what I mean? So there's this whole big push for diversity and inclusion. And the president of the school was making a speech before the lecture. He was like, I wanted to say, and I hope I don't misquote this. I wanted to say, he said 42% of the student population were students of color.
Oh, wow.
Right? Which is a big push.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a big improvement. Because like 10 years ago, we were nowhere near this diverse. But he was like, at the same time, only 83% of our African-American students are graduating. So there's still a disconnect somewhere that we're trying to improve.
Yeah.
And the lecturer, Dr. Washington, got up and he said something I thought was interesting in the fact of, we're opening up our admissions and letting people in, but are we cognizant of maybe not necessarily their comfortability level, but like being functioning in a space that isn't really built for them. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you could get in the door, but still feel like I don't belong here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's so many other things with that. I mean, even myself now working at UTA, one of the things that I like about that is because the type of demographic of students that we service, you get what I'm saying? People sometimes, you can have everything there, but the majority of the thing is we're dealing with like working class people. And I like that idea simply because, I feel like you're really seeing where people are and you're helping to move the culture. But the biggest thing I'm saying about that is little things can make it hard to go to school, like FAFSA, What happens when you fill out your financial aid? How do you get books? How do you apply for graduation? How do you make sure you're getting all of your credits? Those things have absolutely nothing to do with taking a class, but it has everything to do with if you graduate or not.
Yeah, that's true. Because like, if you're not used to working in that system or like having to deal with that system, or your parents never went to school, so they don't know how to work the system. They just like, yo, you got in, we got the financial aid paperwork and went through, but like, oh, I'm taking classes, but like, what am I on track to do? Like, oh, I just got a Bachelor of Arts in General Studies. You know what I mean? Well, what are you doing with that?
Yeah, most definitely. So I think it's strategy too. You get what I'm saying? It's one thing to actually have the tools, and I think about a degree as like kind of a tool you have to get into the door. But do you have a strategy? Do you know what to do once you have that degree? Like I always think I always compare getting the degree to like, being in barber college or something. Like anybody can go to barber college and complete the requirements there, but how do you actually gain clientele? How do you actually, make sure you're servicing or identifying a particular demographic or customer group that you're servicing? All of those things I think make sense, and I kind of compare that to college because going there, access is one thing, but if you've historically been denied from a type of environment, a type of space, you need a little bit more coaching, a little bit more guidance through that space when it's your first time,
Yeah. No, most definitely. Well, with that being said, man, like, what do you think about this, right? I have a master's degree. My ex-wife has a master's degree, right? And like, yo, when I was teaching down there, I would always bring my kids to school. They would sit through class with me. One, I kind of want them to see what I do and like, they'd be like, oh yeah, my dad's a professor. Like, you know what I mean? That's something that they could say, like, oh, if we have a career day, I could bring my dad, he's a professor. Some shit like that. Like, but also for them to get the sense of like, oh, it's just inbred in me to go to college, kind of thing. But at the same time, like, I do believe that college is not a necessity for success. Like, I think it's based off the individual and what your goals are. Like, if a kid has interest in like, cars or something, and he's some way autistic in like car parts and fixing them shits, or like, yo, you may not go to college, but you could like be really good at that, and that doesn't require that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, do you feel like it? Like, we just encourage it to do it just to like say we did it, or like really focus on what your goal is? Because there's a lot of people out there with degrees that still working, high school diploma needing jobs.
Yeah. And I think that's the idea about this, though, in general. I think college also, remember, I think we sometimes forget liberal arts is supposed to just basically introduce us to a lot of different things within culture, within sciences, within the literature, the arts, the history, and those types of things. So on the one hand, I think about college not necessarily as a necessity, but as an access point to people who traditionally don't have certain resources. It's kind of like a country club of sorts. I'm using this concept to say, I always think about in school how many people I get to meet, like the idea that we got to meet within the context of a university.
Yeah, no, most definitely. Like, and that's the thing with me, like, and I was talking to some students today, and one of my students told me that they had skipped class to go to this convention that was a job fair, and they had got like 2 job offers. And I was like, yo, do your thing. Because like, let me tell you something, network connections is worth way more than your GPA is. You know what I mean? Because like, yeah, I'm going like, because obviously like I'm a film school graduate. Anything that I wanted to learn about making films, I could learn that on YouTube. But like within meeting people that have the same interests as me, working with those people who are better than me, and like being able to work with them, meet them, make these connections. That's how I was able to like, ascend in a sense. You know what I mean? Like, it was about that.
Yeah. No, and I think that's kind of what is being around, though, because, like, I think that's the idea. I think college is kind of like a springboard for a lot of different people, particularly when you're interested in so many types of things. Like, I really consider myself a true nerd, but the thing is, I always like to distinguish something. I want to say this. I consider myself a black nerd, and I really like to claim that black nerd part of it because, I think we're used to our only black nerds being like Steve Urkel. But I'm kind of excited to be in these types of spaces because I know I'm always getting to meet somebody doing something new. So, like, for instance, think about your film, The Other Black Guy. I think I could only meet someone doing a film like that and talking about it and wrestling with ideas. Me as an English person now, I can only meet someone else like that in the context of an intellectual environment, like a school or like an artist workspace. And I just think that the idea for me, I look at school more so as like an artist workspace. Where do I get to meet so many different people moving, thinking, producing? That's the cool thing for me.
Yeah. And it's funny, man. You talk about that black nerd thing. I recently started doing comedy, right? I've been doing stand-up. And most of the rooms that I've been doing is like predominantly white, but I'm killing them shit. And I always question myself of like how I would do in a black club.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I don't know, man.
Yeah.
but in that sense, and it's funny because my aunt seen a clip and she was like, yo, you found your niche because you're funny to white people. And she was like, what even made you want to do that? Because you're not even the funniest person in this family. Like, and I'm not. Like, when we go to family reunions, I'm the nigga getting joked on.
Yeah.
My cousins and uncles is the niggas that have everybody cracking up. But, like, in that sense of, like, I get made fun of for being a nerd. I always got made fun of for being a nerd. You know what I mean? And it almost, like, kind of fucked with me a little bit because I was, like, in predominantly white classes. So it made me feel like, you get that sense of not black enough. I don't know if you ever felt like you had a pretty black experience, but, like, having that sense of, like, I'm the corny nigga. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. But I kind of accept it now. Like, call me corny, nigga. Like, I'm gonna eat that shit up.
You know what I think is funny now? Hearing you say that, and I think that in hindsight, you say, like, why did my parents really want me to go to an HBCU?
Yeah.
I had a real positive black experience there, so I never questioned my blackness. And that's something that I found to be kind of interesting when dealing with people who haven't had experiences in positive black environments. Like, I've been around, it's never a question, are black people smart enough? Are black people good enough? That's not a debate in my mind. That's not something that's an insecurity for me. But I think it's only because for 4 years, I was heavily indoctrinated with, this idea of black excellence. So I never questioned myself in relation to that. I also claim the idea, I'm coming from a place where Spike Lee, Maynard Jackson, all these types of people have come up, to be, go on to be successful. So I don't think I had that. Now, that's anyway, I'm saying that to say the power of an example, a visual example, a role model that's almost accessible, so to speak. I think it does a whole lot for your mind. And
most definitely, man. Most definitely. Because I tell this story all the time. I think you've heard me tell this story. Like, when I first got to UTA, like, it's funny because I interviewed Gabe, which my Latino homie, he graduated my first year. And his thesis project was Streets of Zion, which was a hood movie. And when I seen that, I was like, "Oh shit, let's go!"
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because if they let that fly here, like, oh, okay, I feel free to, but also like, I had this sense of like unbelonging, but luckily, Yaki was there, and I was able to like have a direct like. And I don't like, role model, whatever, but like a direct access, like have direct access to a man who like we had similar backgrounds.
And doing what you wanted to be doing.
Yeah, doing literally what I want. Like he is what I want to be when I'm his age. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, I got direct access to that. And then within meeting Spencer, and then meeting you, meeting Cedric, And I talk about this pocket of blackness because that's what it is. It's like, yo, this was the very first time. Not that I've not met other intelligent black people. I'm not gonna say that, but like when I was in the military, it was like a different sense. It was like I interacted with everybody, and it was the hood brothers, it was the woke brothers, quote unquote, the quote unquote corny nigga. You know what I mean? Like I think it's all these mixtures of like black nerds. You said,
Yeah.
But this was the first time that I've actually had that experience of like, yo, I could talk about intellectual black shit freely and not be the singular voice.
I know.
You know what I mean?
The only place I ever feel like that is the barbershop. That's the only other place. You know what I mean? That's the only other place. School or the barbershop.
Yo, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about moving. And let me tell you something about moving to a predominantly white area. Let me tell you the two hardest things to find when you move.
Man.
Is a barbershop
man
and a good weed man. Like,
those things
those are the two most crucial things to a nigga well-being.
Moving around, pinpointing locations. That's why I always thought in Kansas we had one black barbershop, and it was I just always think about that. If the barbershop was not there in my Kansas experience, it would have been totally different. That's where I had my jumping off point to meet people in the school, in the community, in the this, because everybody, you get what I'm saying. Have you noticed?
And this goes back to
the haircut.
You said what?
There's always someone in the barbershop just in there not getting a haircut.
You just want to be in there amongst the conversation. I always got something to say.
Yeah.
Your drunk uncle, niggas. So let's talk about that real quick, because I thought we had a text conversation that was really interesting, right? Give me a little compare and contrast to your HBCU experience versus your PWI experience in your education.
You know what? It's funny that you're saying that. I sometimes, this is something I'm noticing a little bit more now. If I wanted to do at Morehouse or something like that, let's say if we wanted the student organization, wanted to put on this type of event, wanted to do this or do that, we never thought in our head, what does this look like to white people? Are white people going to be accepting of this? Is this going to be offensive? Is this going to be positive? I mean, just any type of thought. That's one thought I never had to deal with in undergrad. And I think that's so interesting in terms of how I develop, because when I hear my students of color talk now at UTA, or when I heard students of color talk at like Kansas, that was a big thing that was in people's minds. What will white people think? You know? What will white people think? And I just always think that just that alone played a big part in my development, because instead of thinking, what do white people think? I was so pressed, like, is this going to be a quality enough event where people will be interested in general to come out? You know, I was never into just like, what do white people think? That was so interesting, you know.
Yo, it's funny you say that, man. Now that you say that, I'm kind of like, yo, you're not wrong. Because I think, and like I said, when I seen Gabe's film and seen that it was a hood movie, and he screened it at the Dallas Video Fest. And it's so funny because we were talking about it. He screened it at the Dallas Video Fest, and it's a hood movie about a half Mexican dude, half black dude growing up in the hood on both sides. And like most of his actors weren't actors; they were real niggas from the hood. Most of them was rappers, and when it screened, so many of the cast and crew and cousins, brothers, everybody brought their people, but it was a mixture of like the hood niggas and then like uppity film criticky folks. Yeah. You know what I mean? But the theater was bumping, like, you know what I mean? Like a black premiere, nigga, and like niggas was yelling, niggas was laughing loud, niggas was oh shit. You know what I'm saying? It was lit. But it was funny because Gabe said he got a criticism of like, oh, it was too much cussing, it was too much this, and you needed subtitles for the non-Spanish parts. I'm like, God damn, that's kind of racist. But he didn't give a fuck about caring what white people thought. And to me, that was encouraging because it was like, oh, I don't got to do that. This was the first time I felt like I didn't have to do that. I had direct role models that showed me I didn't have to do that.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the biggest thing about it when I think about my contribution. So I always think about, even when coming in contact with people, I try to make them think about that. Think about the quality of your work and what you're producing. Like, I think about your thesis project in so many types of ways. I think simply because you had the type of committee that you had, we were able to appreciate and see the type and understand the types of stories you were trying to tell. Because I was thinking, it felt like when I was watching the other black guy, I was like, oh, this is so many inside jokes right here, but it resonated. You know what I'm saying? And that way I could tell you, hey, this is accurate. This is yada, yada, yada. Hey, you might need to tweak and revise this. But the idea is, I just think, like, look at how much in the making this is. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, we so far from the promised land. It's the idea that you could be in a program to even have enough professors, black men professors at that, where you could feel justified to do work like that. And it's just like I said, I think it's just going to be a longer process that we all have to commit to. Like, the beautiful black struggle is not that beautiful and is not that fast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Slavery has not been over 200 years. So I think about that. Like, what are we trying to do? And I think it's interesting. Think about, like, what you're doing for people on campus, what your presence is for people on campus. You feel me? That's kind of a more long type of game that we're playing. I just imagine what type of student that you're going to basically be like, you know, what Yaqui was for you, you're going to be like that for somebody else.
Yo, and that was my whole thing of staying in education. Yeah. Because, like, I want to be that for somebody else. Because, like, I think, like we talked about before, representation is very important. Like I said, that was one of the reasons I wanted to stay in education, because, like, at one point I was going to do Teach for America, because I researched it, and, like, yo, if you look at the teaching population, it's like 2% black males.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was like a study that, like, you know, black males between whatever grade, I want to say, like, I don't know, maybe like 5th in high school. I don't remember what the time-wise was, but you were more likely to go to college if you had, like, a black male teacher. And I thought back on my, like, you know, educational history. To be honest with you, the only black teachers, well, I had, like, black female teachers that were, like, you know, those Annie type figures, you know what I mean? Like, that slap the shit out of you in class and say, call your mama. Like, you know what I mean? Like, them types didn't fuck around. But, like, black males, only coaches. Only coaches.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I always thought about that, like, yo, I want to leave the world better than, you know what I mean? Like, I want to have an influence, a positive influence on somebody. You know what I mean? I think in academia might be the best way to do it, because that's where, like you said, we're molding minds, and, like, people are interacting in these intellectual spaces that grow ideas.
Yeah. No, I think that makes so much sense, because I always wondered to myself, what if I had, other than my PE teacher, what if I had a male teacher or a male figure as an elementary teacher? But more than that, what if I had a black male figure as an elementary teacher? When I say black male figure, like, it doesn't matter what type of black male. I'm just thinking, what if I had that growing up in some types of ways? How would that diversify my even impressions of teaching? Would I, by seeing a black male teacher as a young kid, think, hey, I could be a teacher? You know, does it change something about you earlier on? I always wondered that. Like, what do early impressions, like, for instance, you bringing your kids up to a college campus, they're familiar with college campuses now. They're not intimidated by them because my dad works at a college campus. I always wondered, because let's be for real, early in life, we spent a lot of time with our teachers.
Yeah.
So hopefully you have a good teacher, because you're going to spend a lot of time with that teacher, and they're going to shape you in some very significant ways.
Yeah, and they have such a, you know, heavy influence. You know, as a parent, you spend, if you think in the scope of things, you spend very little time actually parenting your child as they grow. Like, the majority of it is school and friends. Like, man,
it makes me scared to have kids because of that. And I mean,
like, you know what I mean? Like, Like, I just want my son to be like, have integrity and have find a passion and find a way to make a living off that passion. And as long as he's happy doing that, like, that's be a stand up individual. You know what I mean? But okay, so shifting gears a little bit, right? So the other black guy. The other black guy was a film I did in grad school. It was my second year film. And it's basically about this guy who's working in this all-white office, and he encounters another black guy gets hired, and he sort of creates this whole, competition between them in his head. And I think for me, that was speaking to this larger sentiment or question. I'll pose it as a question. I'll pose this as a question to get your thoughts, and I'll tell you an experience I had. Do you feel like when we are in these spaces, like of being the only black guy in academia, whether you're a teacher or in like a business space, when we have somebody else come in, do you interact with them differently? Do you feel like there's an underlying competition, or are we to the point now where we can, another brother got his foot in the door, let's go?
Yeah, that's funny that you said that, because when I see, I'm like the Key and Peele episode, I think, when like they're parodying Obama, I guess, when he's walking through, when he sees...
Oh, yeah, dapping everybody up.
I get excited when I see other black people, to be real with you. It's never, I think like, yes, I always think, yes, another black person. I'm not alone. I can kind of get certain things. Like if it's something that's, like for instance, let's just say like this. If I'm around something, a majority audience, and something is offensive and people don't know it, I sometimes have to break down, why is this offensive? Why you shouldn't say that? Even, and sometimes I just let it go. But when you're around somebody, sometimes it feels good to be like, hey, you weren't crazy. That was offensive. And you can just give each other a look and you just have it. And sometimes acknowledgement is all you need sometimes, just for people to say, hey, that was bad. I see you. I'm here with you. I'm a witness to this with you. And I like that. We get to make so many jokes. I love it.
Let me ask you this. Now, do you feel like you interact differently when you see a black person in a predominant white space versus, just like the whole thing's black? Regardless of what it is, event, do you find yourself like interacting with new black people differently, depending on the space that you meet them?
I would say depending on the space that I meet people, definitely I don't let every conversation come out. But typically in every space that I go to, and it's a predominant space, I tend to go to the black people first just so I feel more comfortable. Not saying I don't branch out and talk to other people, because technically I do eventually do that over the day. But again, I'm a shy dude in some types of ways. It's like I like to think of myself as a kid. So I like to feel comfortable. I have to be comfortable in order to thrive.
Yeah, no, I feel you. So, like, well, this was the instance that made me kind of think of this, right? So, like I've been up in Minnesota for a minute, and my world is white. Like, you know what I mean? Like the predominance of my world is white. Like my interactions are, you know what I mean? Like, I have very few, just black interactions. So I seen on Instagram one day, one of the actresses that I worked on an old film was up here shooting a movie. And I was like, yo, that's dope, you up here, which y'all working on? She was telling me oh yeah, the director, this and that. It was like, yo, if y'all need anything, put me on. I'll do anything. I'm just trying to, break into some, networking up here. So she hit me up the next day, we need extras for this church scene. I ended up running sound for him. It was a black film. The whole crew and cast was black. I think it was one white dude. He was cool though. But afterwards, it was after we got done shooting, we had an after party at the Airbnb. I was once again, those interactions that we would have, I was once again able to have that. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
haven't had that in a while, like those really deep intellectual Black conversations. And it's funny because, like, I had the time of my life. And it's funny, I was at school in my predominantly white arena, and it was like a new faculty luncheon, and it was, I think, one other Black professor. It was a Black female, but like our energy was totally different. And I don't know if it's just like I feel like putting this out. Black women just drag me. They gonna drag me anyway. I don't care. But like, I don't know if they just don't fuck with me. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, they got this vibe with me. Like, but it was just really standoffish. And I didn't know if that was because we were both Black in this space, or it was like what that was about. Like, yo, when I was in this Black space, I was like, oh, so interactive. My dialect was completely different. I felt comfortable. Here, I was like, yo, I don't know what your intentions are. Like, you ain't saying that to me, so I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you know what? In one type of way, I can see this. In one type, I always like to acknowledge the intersections or whatever a little bit. And sometimes, and then, you know, this is just from experiences I've had with friends and other things. I do notice Black women are a lot more attentive to how they interact with people just because it's harder for Black women. You know, particularly in these professional spaces, a lot of different times. So I notice it's easier for me, like, for instance, in our group, particularly our group chat, our group message thing, I think it's very interesting that us as Black men are able to come together. And, you know, that's a safe space for us. But I sometimes wonder, do safe spaces, do safe cohorts, do safe communities like this in the academy exist for Black women too? And that's one of the things that I can even say from an HBCU standpoint, like, Morehouse was a safe haven for Black men. As you know, like Spelman was a safe haven for Black women. But I kind of sometimes look around, particularly in my work environment now, and I ask myself, where is the safe space for Black women here? That's something that I've noticed. Like, I'm so very fortunate to have had you guys, like, to ease my transition into Texas in general. But more so than that, I was always able to debate with you all. And the one thing I liked about it, we're all able to say stuff with one another. And you can be like, as you know, in our group message, you be like, hey, I agree with that. That's a good point. And, hey, man, I do not agree with that. That's a horrible idea. But the thing is, you know, we're all Black men and we're all different. And that's the point.
Yo, and that's what I loved about it. And to be honest with you, my original idea was like, if we could all do a podcast together, that would be so dope. Because, like, I love those conversations, and like, we all come at it from different perspectives. Like, I'll crack a joke about some shit and y'all be like, yo, man, you wildin', son. Like, yeah.
But I love that part about it, though. So I think about, like, you know, if I was just around people that I agree with, people that I thought the way that I thought, I don't know how I would grow.
No, most definitely.
So I think I always think about that in terms of interacting with people too. You know, again, what has made me comfortable out interacting with these, you know, majority environments is because typically I run into some group, some cohort of Black men that kind of makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. So when you tend to ask me at these events, when I go up to people to speak, interestingly enough, so I think that I tend to go into these situations and I see a lot of Black men that make me feel comfortable. Like, okay, when I first met Yaki, he had locks. Of course, I was like, oh, I had these phenotypic type of things. Like, okay, I can talk to him, you know, this brother in the locks and the dashiki. You get what I'm saying? Then I come over and I look down and she was like, okay, he got Nikes. Okay, that's something that I would deal with, you know, something I would wear. These kind of clues that I see. So before we even open our mouths and say, hello, my name is, I see all of these features that I'm like, yo, you know what? I know something about them is that I relate to. So those things are like kind of helpful for me. You know, all the things that are not said before I even have a conversation with you.
Oh yeah. And it's interesting, man. I was at a comedy club. Like, I do stand up at this club out here in Rochester, Minnesota, Goonies, on Thursdays. Plug. So come check me out. So I'm at this club, and it's you know, majority white. Like, you know, it's white. It's white here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's Minnesota. Like, I don't expect anything different. But it was funny, right? So I get there early, and it's a bunch of comics, all of them white, and we're sitting there talking, and they're talking about like some fucking garbage can kids or some shit like that. I don't know, some real like mayonnaise heavy shit. And so it's funny because I'm sitting there, I don't really know what they're talking about. So I'm sitting in the cut. I'm just like a sit in the cut type person anyway. But so I'm sitting there, they're talking. This black dude walk in. I look at him, he look at me. I didn't know this dude from Adam, but we both instantaneously was like, yo, what's good, my nigga? Like, oh shit, son, there's another black guy here. Like, yo, man, I'm glad you here. Like, yo.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so very few and far between to just see that we both was like, I don't know you, nigga, but like, I'm glad to see you.
Yeah. No, I know the feeling exactly. I know the feeling all too well.
But also, man, like, let me ask you this, right? How do you navigate, like, when we're in these predominantly white spaces, like you are a very, like, fashionable dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was funny. I remember Yaki tried to roast you. You was like, nah, my nigga, this is Jeremy Scott 2019. Get your weight up. Maybe one day you can have this. I was like, oh, the nigga hit him with a flex. Yeah.
You know, I mean, did I say that?
Yeah, hit him with a flex. But, like, you are a very fashionable dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, do you feel like, one, like, being that professor, you gotta, or in that predominantly white space, you gotta, like, represent, like, you know, that feeling of like, oh, I'm the representation of all black people. One, and then two, like, you're a young dude, man. You, like, when I found out how old you was, I was kind of salty. I was like, yo, man, I look up to this nigga younger than me. How you big bro and me? Like, I kind of felt some kind of way about that. but you a young dude, you like fashionable, like not in the sense of that ivory tower, traditional ivory tower, even like being black and like, even like, you know, suits or shirt and tie or whatever. Like, do you feel like people interact with you different or treat you different or like,
Oh, man, absolutely. Actually, I consciously dress a certain way on purpose because I feel like I am an 80s baby, right? And if you know about 80s babies, you know, we gonna rock our sneakers. You know, that's one big thing. And I'm like, one of the biggest things I think the way people dress is very political. You know, it says a lot about your social leanings, political affiliations and whatnot. So I'm always cognizant of how I dress in majority settings just because I want to say, hey, this dude right here is wearing Jeremy Scott tennis shoes, carrying his Jeremy Scott, 2019 bag, but he's a professor. You know, he looks hip-hop, but the idea, whatever that means, I don't even know what that means. I just heard people tell me I dress hip-hop.
Hip-hop is the new urban. Like, you know what I'm saying? They can't say, oh, it looks hood or it looks black. It looks urban. It looks hip-hop. Like, that's a more safer, way to say it looks black. I don't know.
But no, I just always think about that. I'll be for real because I think about brother Cornel West and what he wears, every time. And he's very cognizant when he wears his black suits. He's doing that for a particular reason. And, and I think that's cool. But I was always thinking to myself, if I ever, like the black suit for Cornel West is like a uniform in a sense, and they're very nice black suits, might I add. But I was thinking, while I respect his decision to wear black suits, I want to use the same type of idea, but I did want to acknowledge I'm not from the same generation from Cornel West. Our attire choices would look different. However, it's all a type of blackness. It just looks very different across different generations. So I kind of want to keep that thing going. But no, I'm very much into fashion. I think it's so political. I think with the Black Panthers, for instance, most people do not know that the Black Panthers started free lunch, but many people know that the Black Panthers wore turtlenecks and berets and look cool. So I think it's very important to, keep an eye on aesthetics.
Interesting. It's funny because, like, again, man, like grad school for me was beyond, like, anything in the classroom. It was, like, having the opportunity to have, like, man, if I didn't have that, y'all was my like black counsel. You know what I mean? Like, in that sense of like, like the way y'all dressed and like made me feel comfortable. Just like, it don't gotta be like, because I think we had this conversation in the group text of like, are we dressing up for ourselves, or are we dressing up to impress them? Because I look at a lot of like white people I work with, and like, you know, motherfuckers wear like cargo shorts and like unironed t-shirts and shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't really like, it doesn't matter to them. Like, I think business casual has went out the window, especially in academia. I don't know, like in the professional world quite yet.
But I mean, that's my thing. I just like dressing. I feel like no matter what job I would be in, I would like to dress. I'm just happy that being a professor affords me an environment where it's not frowned upon all the time, you know, and people can kind of see that I'm bringing my culture into this space with me. But more so, you know what I'm thinking about this one more? I had Dr. Raming in college. He was a fly professor. I mean, he was just fly. And I think that also influenced me to say, you know what, when I become a professor, I'm about to be best dressed like this man right here. And it was interesting because when I say fly, I don't mean fly in the traditional sense of just being a professor. I mean, this dude was just a cool dude. You get what I'm saying? Like what he could wear to work, to happy hour, to wherever, and still be considered a fly dude. So I really like that idea, getting to see him like every day in class. And, you know, I remember everybody used to be thinking about, what is he going to wear today? What is he going to wear today? You know, that's interesting. It has another incentive of coming to class, you know, just to see what this dude's going to wear.
I used to feel that way about Yaki's shoes.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, this nigga, man. Like, yo, first of all, man, if I had a smaller foot, I'd be killing y'all niggas. Like, come on, man. They don't show no love for big feet niggas. Like, I gotta crunch my foot in the 14. I really wear a 15.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, ladies, I wear a 15.
Wow.
Anyway. So, well, speaking of which, nice transition. Now, this is what I really wanted to ask you. Now, we'll wrap up in a minute, but I wanted to ask you this before we go, right? Now, like I said, man, you're a young dude, you're a fashionable dude, and, you know, part of your course study is like data mining, you know, internet. So you one of the first people that I remember when we were doing Yaki's web series or streaming series, and we were working with you for like the social media aspect of it, and you were telling me about like, you know, how the data mining and like algorithms and, you know, using bots, and I was like, whoa. So I started looking that shit up. But like, you're into that realm of like the internet and like all these things, right? So let me ask you this, right? How do you navigate being a professional, being a professor, being an educator, and fighting on the internet? How do you balance the two? Because I'm trying to find a balance, man. Listen, I tried to post a thirst trap the other day. That shit just failed. Like, I tried to start sweatpants season. First of all, ladies, hashtag sweatpants season. I'm letting them hang this winter. I want to be objectified. But that shit ain't getting no likes, man. How do you succeed in your thotting, man? I see the thirst traps you be posting, and I'm like, man, this nigga here is out here.
Well, I think you got to say, I think I grew into it in some types of ways. You know what I'm saying? First off, again, you know, I always like to think about my stuff as art first. I always like to think about my stuff as art first, but no, really, like some of the ways, like I really get to interact with a lot of cool people. Like some of the times I'm just out and about. I'll be for real. I'm in happy hours. I'm in the streets. So to work with certain photographers that even, you know, New York models don't get to work with, I take.
Oh man, you really an Instagram thought in these streets. You cheating with professional for New York photographers and shit. I was like, oh, he is on the next level. This nigga here.
But no, I really do. I really think that's important because it's just like those are the types of things. Like when you ask me how I got into data mining and stuff, I ended up, and this is just kind of like a perfect storm. When I was in graduate school, coincided with the rise of Instagram, rise of Twitter, rise of Facebook, all of these types of things coming together. So we started this conversation talking about visual rhetoric and stuff, you know? I am a canvas. I am visual rhetoric for people. No, I'm just playing, but being for real, I just like
you was working all summer for that visual representation.
Yeah, you know, and then of course, let me tell you something. As you probably know, I am really big into working out. So you know what I'm saying. Why do people go to the gym to work out? Just so when someone can compliment you on your six pack, I think.
Yeah, man, it's all about that. It's all about that gym selfie. Listen, man, I ain't gonna front like I don't do it. I be trying to thirst trap like a motherfucker. That shit just don't be working for me. I don't know what it is. I don't know where I'm feeling that, man. I was trying to get some help from you. What makes a good thirst trap, man? You tell me. I got to get a New York photographer. I gotta get my angles wrong. Like I got to get some shadows or something. Like what's the deal?
You know, let me say a good thirst trap is think about it like this. You gotta always leave something to the imagination. I understand that people like to show off every single God-given, you know, gift that they have on their body. But sometimes I think one of the biggest things is playing with people's imaginations. It's what people don't know that people are more interested in versus what they know.
So I got to be more mysterious. That's what it is.
Yeah. You can't do a thirst trap every day because then you just become everybody knows what you're gonna do with them.
Yeah. No, I don't be doing them every day. But every now and then I try to throw one out, see what I can catch. That shit don't be catching nothing though.
you know. But it's coming. It's coming. You got to grow in your thoughtness. You know your.
Watch. Hey man, I'm telling you, if I blow up at anything, nigga, it's gonna be a whole nother level. I'm stiff arming these bitches like Marshawn Lynch, goddamn it. I'm a bitch.
This is too funny.
Throw that out there. But yeah, man. So let's wrap this thing up, man. We gotta get out of here. I know you got things to do. You out in DC on teaching hiatus, writing, quote unquote. Before we leave, man, tell the people what you got in the works, what you're working on,
man,
and where they can find you.
Man, I'm really, really busy right now. So what am I working on? First, you can find me on K Ramsey, KRAMBSY. That's on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, and that's even my website, kramsey.com at KRAMBSY. A few things that I'm working on. Again, I'm working on my book, The Geographies of African American Short Fiction. This fall, I also have a digital publication called The Lost in the City. It's about Edward P. Jones's short fiction, and it focuses on D.C., and I kind of talk about gentrification going on in there as well. In addition to that, I have a few little speaking engagements coming up over the next few months, so I'm always excited to, get out here and visit other universities and stuff like that. So, a little busy, but my biggest focus is getting this book done and hopefully getting tenure.
Yo, man, that's what's up, man. I appreciate you stopping through, man, carving out the time for us to do this. And like I said, it's always a pleasure. I love these conversations we get to have, man. Yeah. And I think my whole thing was like, people got to hear this. Like, I ain't trying to make nobody lose their job, so I don't get deep into what we really be saying on some of them shits, because I would be canceled culture like a motherfucker.
I don't know what you're talking about. We always have very positive conversation.
No, but it gets deep, man. It's jokes, but we get serious, man. And I always love these conversations, man. So I appreciate you stopping through.
Most definitely. So I hope you can get the whole crew together on one conversation at some point.
Yo, I want to, man. Like, I'm gonna get y'all individually, and once I get this to get popping, and I can get the video format going, man, we gotta get in the room, man. Black teed up.
No, I'm down with that.
Yo, man. But yeah, man, we're gonna get out of here. This is the For a Colored Man podcast. It's your host, Terry Bluez, and we out.
Peace.